Let's go, Uncle
Welcome
Money.
to another episode of Practice Prosperity. We have a special guest today, Alain Emmanuel. He is known as the happiness coach, but he's also a licensed professional counselor. We're going to get into relationships, how to maintain them, keep them strong. He actually mentioned that this is a passion of his, so this is going to be a fun episode. We're also going to touch on the business side, how he's operating his business and growing his practice. So, welcome today, Alain.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
So, if you don't mind, can you please introduce yourself, your practice, and the type of clients that you love to serve?
So, my name, as you said, Alain Emmanuel. I go by the happiness coach, as well as I have my therapy practice, which is Alain Emmanuel Therapy, which people find me. I'm licensed in Georgia. But the work that I do is centered around individuals building connection. And the work of connection for me is helping individuals connect to themselves and helping them connect to others. And so that usually takes the form of relationships. And so I do couples work. Um, and in terms of the internal work, I do happiness work with people to teach them how to raise their levels of happiness through consecutive coaching work and some of the opportunities I've had in helping people to just get to the point where they can feel like they are living the kind of life they want to live, and that the life that they've wanted to live doesn't pass them by, because a lot of us know that life is short, and you want to do with the time you have as much as you can, and make sure that it's following in the direction of your goals and dreams. So that's the work I do.
As a brief detour, happiness in
Yeah.
this day and age, this digital age, comparison, we feel like people are doing so many great things and they may do or may not be doing. Like, what is the state of happiness in our society, and why is it such a challenge to reach that point?
So those are two very different and deeper questions. I'll try to be short about the answers, because they can really, you can have an entire hour on those two questions. What is the state of happiness? And how do you actually get to that happiness? And I think the reason why people struggle with getting to happiness is because of the definition of happiness. The truth is that even within scientist circles, those who have studied the concepts have a hard time identifying how happiness fits within certain constructs, and whether or not we have a true meaning for it.
Mhm.
So it's very easy to get lost in the definition. And so sometimes that makes it hard to objectify, right? To make it something that, or not objectify, but make objective. Be objective about what we're measuring when we say, am I happy or am I not? So I think that's part of the answer, is that it's hard to pin down, but there are ways to pin it down. That's some of the work that I do around meaning, um, around purpose, around process.
Yeah.
So I have a process I call the MAP process, and that actually is a part of how we measure people's happiness levels. So in my coaching, I look at people's happiness levels and see how do I help you move from where you are to where you're going. We do that in coaching. I'm also working on a workbook, so that's one of the things that I'm looking to help people get to. Um, why is it so hard to reach? Outside of the definition, I think you also have the question of whether or not you can ever touch it. Is it tangible? Is it something that people feel like they have an idea as to what it really means? The funny thing is, when you talk about happiness, you may not know how to define it, but everybody says they know what it feels like.
Mhm.
So, good place to start is in the objective, very objective area of feelings. I'm being facetious when I say that, but it's just looking at how you feel, because that'll be a first sign, right? One of the first signs that tells you, yeah, maybe you are not at that place in your life. Maybe you need to make some shifts. But in terms of where we are as a society, I think that we have to tell the truth that a lot of people struggle with happiness because it's not something that they've ever been taught how to get to.
Mm.
So the goal is always to try to actually make steps towards that.
Yeah.
And what you start with oftentimes is um, going to determine how far you're going. If you're way in that depression state, it takes a little more work to get you towards happiness. But the truth is, happiness is more of an average in between spaces. It's not one area. If you think of it as a goal, it'll be a much more difficult space to reach than if you look at it in terms of uh, a lifestyle change that brings you towards certain markers that tell you that yes, because of the average of these markers, I feel like my happiness is moving in the right direction. So,
That's a good answer. I think for me, like, um, I had to realize, I had a moment where I was like, I don't play anymore. So I started doing something called improv, where
yeah.
people come together, act out different scenes, and where we were just having fun. And I thought to
Yep.
myself, I work, I enjoy family, I
Yep.
play sports, which I think is fun, but do I take a step back and just play and be in the moment, which is what improv forces you to be, listen and be in that moment. And I
Right.
realized life isn't structured for that.
I will say this. Our Western version of life
Hmm.
doesn't allow for that.
Yeah.
Um, I think that if you go to different places in the world, I think that they have different areas. We know this, like, they're like we talk about, certain countries like Switzerland and other places that have higher levels of happiness within social measures. Why? Because there are certain things on the outside that are kind of set up to lead people into certain areas of life. But the truth is, as much as we can say right now,
Mhm.
living in America that is a free country, there are things you could put in your environment that can actually build the level of happiness that you're looking for. And when you talk about you added play, that's one of those things that I categorize around creativity. I think that a lot of people miss that level of creativity and spontaneity in their lives. A lot of times people are living through the regimented spaces of life. And I think that's what you were referring to when you say, yeah, we're not set up for that.
Yeah.
But the truth is, you have to ask yourself, what is the goal?
Hmm.
What is the goal? Because if you are looking at becoming, say, successful, then
Right.
yeah, it's not set up for necessarily for you to be happy. It's actually set up for the challenge of, reaching certain markers. But if you understand success as every moment being truly authentic to yourself and living through that, you can actually build a new definition of success that means happiness. So, it's one of those things you have to ask yourself the honest questions, which are, what are your goals and how are you setting those things up in order to get to where it is you want to go? So, yeah.
No, I think that's spot on. I think after this experience, I don't think I want a life where there's no play.
Yeah.
I don't want a life where there's no random creativity moments.
Yep.
And I think that's spot on. So now we talked about happiness, but I think happiness does have to do a lot with the couple work that you do. So
Absolutely.
let's start off by defining some definitions. How do you define in your practice, couples and romantic relationships? How are you defining that?
So, defining the couple themselves, obviously any two people who decide to be committed to each other at some level,
Yeah.
are I would say that that's a couple. And when you come to an understanding about what couples are actually there for, you have to always ask that question, which is what is that? What is their purpose?
Mm,
What is it that the couple is there to supply? Because just like we were talking about happiness and we said, what's your goal? That question comes into play when you get into a conversation around, well, what is supposed to happen for a couple? I will tell you that most people, I'll say most people, and I'm generalizing, I understand, but most people, right, are looking at their relationship through the lens of previous experiences, the things that they think they were taught about being a couple.
yeah.
But if you ask them what is the purpose of a couple, they're not necessary, or the purpose of a relationship, it it literally stumps more couples than you think. And then sometimes you'll get the superficial answers, but to really get to the core of it, that takes some digging. But it's one of the first things that I have. I ask people, if I'm working with a couple, and they come in for therapy, my first question, even in coaching, my first question is, so what is our purpose here as a couple? What is our purpose as a couple? Because if you don't establish what you're going towards, how do you know if you're actually doing the thing you say you're doing? And as human beings, the Viktor Frankl quote, which I think we mentioned the last time you and I talked, like uh humans are meaning-making machines.
Mhm.
That's who we are. So to step into the space of relationship without truly having a definition of what that relationship is supposed to do and serve, you'll be shocked, because oftentimes you may think, oh, I know what the purpose of a couple is. You ask your partner, and your partner has a very opposite or different idea. And maybe there are some places where you say, oh, yeah, we kind of agree on this, but you'll be shocked. And the truth is, I have couples that come in on the verge of divorce, and when you go down to the very bottom, and it's like, you never agreed on what you were doing together. You never agreed on who you were being together. You took, you signed on the dotted line, but never had the conversation around, who do we want to be as a couple? I deal with, African American couples a lot.
Mhm.
And I like to ask them, do you think that you get the Jay-Z's and Beyoncé's, or, the power couples? Do you get those couples without any effort towards what is our goal together? So that is a conversation that I think is lacking for a lot of people, which is, what is the actual purpose of that couple? It'll take you to the next step, which is, how do I want to do life together with this person? Are we meeting the goals that we have in mind? Are we on the same page in terms of where we want to go? Because oftentimes when you find yourself disagreeing with your partner, there's actually a fundamental disagreement as to what it is our direction should be. Which way are we going here? So a lot of times it's that fundamental. So it's not a reason to divorce, it's a reason to actually deepen your relationship. So that's the work we do. But yeah, certainly I would say, the definition around what a couple is serves,
Mhm.
it's one of the most fundamental places to start if you really want to make progress in your relationship.
So that makes me think of two things. The first thing is that person makes me feel good. Is that enough?
I would dare to say to you that I know a lot of people who feel good
Yeah.
and are looking for divorce.
Mhm.
I know a lot of couples who love each other
Yeah.
but don't like each other.
Mhm.
So the feelings that you get, and as therapists, I think one of the areas that we specialize in is feelings. We look at what are the feelings, but feelings are nothing but indicators. I do this in my happiness GPS work, where we talk about what are the levels of existence, but feelings, right? Per definition, are really just chemicals that go through the blood and have impact on your ultimate uh, decision making. But feelings are not. Um, a lot of people think they are their feelings. You're not your feeling. I think you know this very well. But you're not your feelings. So if the goal is to feel good in your relationship, which I think that's a fair goal, by the way, there's nothing wrong with saying I want to feel good in my relationship. However, if the goal is to feel good, eventually you're going to find that there are other areas of your existence that lack, because you haven't done the alignment work with some of that. So that's some of the work that we do in happiness, as well as couples work, is are we aligned enough so that we experience the things we desire in our relationships, both to ourselves and to others?
The second thing you brought up as far as defining the relationship purpose, like, is it okay for individuals who are coupled together to have different purposes within the relationship? And how much of the overlap should or shouldn't be when we talk about what is the purpose of us being in this place together?
Yeah. If you don't have different purposes in your relationship, you're not really in a relationship.
Elaborate a little bit on that.
Two human beings with two different brains, with two different interpretations of their past and different upbringing, different ways of seeing life, different ways in which they interacted with others, cannot come to the exact same conclusion purposes in life.
Mhm.
This is why we're individuals and we are truly individual. There's a fingerprint on every individual that no one else carries. That's why, because we genuinely, through our expression in the world, are coming through in very different ways. Sometimes you might have a lot overlapping. Nothing's wrong with that.
Mhm.
Sometimes you might have some overlapping and some not overlapping. You need to be careful the areas that are not overlapping, not to turn those into areas of fight, but rather areas of expansion.
Wow. Yeah.
So because it's easy to want to be your partner or want to have the same ideas as your partner in the same alignment with your partner all the time, but you'll be in a lot of arguments. Um, so really, the goal should be that in the places where we don't align, I am, and here goes the definition of a partner showing up. I am supporting you in your deepest need. The deepest need of the soul and of the self, in by my definition, is self-expression. So do you hold a space for your partner to fully self-express? You'd be shocked at how many couples come in and it's nothing but there isn't enough space. When I say space, I mean space in which when you exist, I have made space for you to be something that is not just my partner. In other words, we carry roles. We carry roles, you know. You can be a father, a husband, a son, and a brother all at the same time, right? So we carry those things in our lives as roles. Yet in relationships, oftentimes those roles become places where people argue what should or shouldn't happen. Sometimes they don't even argue. Sometimes they simply expect. And those are the deep and dangerous places because your expectations can lead you to major disagreements in places where you might not necessarily need the disagreement. You might simply need exploration.
Makes sense. So one of the quotes, I think it was James Baldwin, it was actually a debate. I don't think he quoted, but he was discussing with the young lady
Yeah.
different things. And the young lady described it's like, hey, you go out to work, you put on a face.
Yep.
With the child, you put on a face. When you talk to your friends, you put on a face. Does not the romantic relationships deserve some type of face? And I think that's what you're alluding to. It's like, yes, you want to be yourself, but there is a role or like you said, a function that your partner needs when you're in a relationship. Why
Mhm.
not fulfill that as you're doing in those other spaces in your life?
I think you need to have the roles. I think you need to have the roles uh, in order to have clarity around what it is you're building.
Yeah.
But I think that the issue is usually in the definition of those roles. So, uh, you know, a lot of people want the traditional relationship,
Mm-hmm.
um, but then they're not prepared for the traditional role, right? Um, and so I think the issue is not so much whether or not you need a role, because we play roles in order to actually create safety for others and for
Mm,
ourselves. We
yeah.
play the roles. The question is, inside of your role, is there space?
Yeah.
Is it so limiting that your role says this is what it is? If we tell the truth, there's no rule book, right? There's no rule book that comes with roles.
No.
There's no rule book that comes to explain to you how you should do a relationship with others. So it takes deep internal awareness of yourself
Mm-hmm.
and what you bring to the table, so that when you are in that space of exchange, you understand, oh, okay, well, this is what you need from me. I can be that
Mm-hmm.
without being inauthentic. That's the space that is dangerous for a lot of people because they don't know how to make that shift. So they struggle with, how do I how can I be a thing that I don't know how I switch into with you? So there has to be some genuine work. I call it the internal GPS work that says, I know how I stand and how at every level of existence, I know who I am. So this is important because you can step into a relationship and become the thing that you think your partner needs, but you'll also lose yourself if you don't have an expansion of who you are in that relationship, right? So it's understanding who you are a priority. Before you step into a relationship, I recommend that you do the happiness work to know yourself, to know your relationship to yourself. It's not simple because most of it is just not, we don't talk about it. We certainly, in our conversations, we aren't as authentic as we could be about, hey, genuinely speaking, who are you? Do you come to the table with everything that you know you are? And can you pull that out without blockages, right? Without those energetic blocks that come for people where they can't show up in certain spaces. That has to do with that internal GPS work. And oftentimes it has to do with telling new stories around that space.
Now that's interesting. The story you tell yourself. And I think this work also, I feel like, helps you become a better human being
Yeah.
because you not only give your partner space, but you
Mhm.
give other people in life the space to
Absolutely.
be who they are. I think that's
No
a
question.
big deal.
I think you tapped into the reason I started doing this work.
Hmm.
It literally was that I felt like I wanted to share with people who who I am as a human being and how to navigate being human. Because most of us are not taught even what a human being is, much less how to navigate the machine of the body and the mind and the emotions and the different areas of existence that we have. Those are questionable areas that really should be dived into really daily so that you stay aligned with yourself. Most people are like, oh, can you be out of alignment with yourself? Certainly. When you talk about cognitive dissonance, now I know that may be heady for some people who are listening, but most people can, in the therapy world would know what you're talking about in terms of cognitive dissonance. That comes from a space of being misaligned with yourself. In other words, your behavior, the things you do, may not line up with your identity level of your values, right? So you have that misalignment shows up and you're thinking to yourself, why am I showing up as two different people? Why do I struggle being in this environment? What's that social anxiety about? There are some deeper questions around your alignment to yourself.
Yeah. How do you allow space for others to be cognitively dissonant? Because I think that's a very human thing.
Mhm.
Your partner will go through it. Other people in life
Yep.
will be inconsistent to what either they state or they feel like they believe. Like, how do you allow space for that? Because I think that's important.
That's a really big and great question, though. I think space, I think space is needs to be defined.
Mhm.
And I'll tell you why I answer that way. As human beings, we know, and I mean, we can go into, what we know about science in terms of the space between an atom, or we can go about the space, between cells and ask ourselves, who are we? Truly, who are we?
Mhm.
And if we're going to be authentic and honest with ourselves, we exist inside of those spaces. Everything else is created from our own machinations and the ways in which we put together our own sense of self, right? So social constructs, right, are created through our ways of self-expressing and aligning with the outside world. What happens when you stop pushing an agenda in those areas? You create space. So space is easier to attain than people think. Help giving people space oftentimes sounds like this mystical idea. It's not. It's actually quite uh, mechanical. When you pause the agenda, you offer space. So what you have to ask is, what are the intentions that and the expectations that come into my relationship that are creating the crowded definition and meaning that I'm creating for my partner? Does that definition have to exist with all of the limits that I put, or are there other ways that I can exist? Because levels of existence are really truly for finding spaces in which we exist without the judgment, without the space of fear, right? Without limiting our emotions to meaning one thing. Some people struggle with emotions not because they don't have them, but because they have too many of them and they can't figure out what's going on. So they have, I'm happy, but at the same time, I'm sad. And it's like, can two things exist at the same time? When you remove the duality from those two things and say, okay, outside of the happiness and the sadness that you feel, how do you exist at your core? And you'll find it, but you have to first wade through, why am I happy? Okay, that has a mechanical and very there's an equation to emotions that I use that actually helps people go, oh, there goes the equation why this is here. And then there is another equation that I use in removing the spaces. I'll give you an example of what I mean. Anxiety. Anxiety is simply two opposing stories, and this is my definition, but it helps people a lot understand what's going on. It's two opposing stories unresolved.
Mm.
So if I believe I'm the greatest person to have ever walked the earth when it comes to painting. I am Picasso incarnated. And I believe that, right? And someone comes in and questions everything I know about me being a great painter in the space of an hour. It's going to give me anxiety. A part of me will ask, why are these two stories and which one is true? So, yeah, we can go into this.
And for me, it's if you give people more space, as we've
Yeah,
defined it, it forces you to actually look at yourself, because what you're doing is breaking down, like you said, social constructs.
yep,
Some people, I've been taught that my background is gray.
yeah.
That's what's been told to me over and over again. But if I leave space for other people to disagree, that could change everything in my
Mhm.
belief system. And
Yes.
that's a tough internal journey.
It is very difficult to do. It's also very easy.
Mm.
It's very difficult because our the purpose of belief systems is to
Mhm.
keep us safe.
Yeah.
So there has to be, even at the neurological level, there has to be an agreement that, and this agreement has to be with yourself, but there has to be an agreement that I am safe.
Mhm.
And let's be honest, some people are not even physically safe. So imagine being in that space and trying to tell yourself you're safe. You're going to have to retell quite a few stories before you could say, oh, I'll be okay being in this space. All right. So you're talking about creating space, but you got to actually tell the truth about what is the purpose of this kind of story retelling that you need to do.
Yeah. That's big. That's real big. Now, the next thing that we talked about in our pre-call is something called empathy.
Yeah.
And I like this because I like starting off with definitions. Like, how do you define empathy within a relationship?
So I think that empathy is really a complex idea. I think you have to tell the truth about the difference between sympathy and empathy, right? Um, Sympathy is disconnected from the actual human being. So sympathy simply says, um, it's not that you don't know the experience or have never had the experience, because you could have the experience but never have had that experience. But when you look at experience of someone else's experience, you can connect it to a certain portion of it, but you might say to yourself, oh yeah, so I you go to somebody and you say my sympathy when someone died, perhaps what it means that someone dies, right? But you haven't walked in their shoes in terms of what they've done to put all of the arrangements together. You haven't sat with them to really be in that space to say, okay, I could exist with you here, right? And empathy, what empathy does is it gives you a space to exist
Mhm.
fully authentically yourself, but to exist with another person's experience. You don't have to become that experience. And I think existence, just as we were talking about, is space. So if you understand that you can be in the same space and you don't have to become the space, right? A lot of people talk about holding space. Holding space for me, I would dare to say, I don't want you holding space for me.
Mm.
I want you to be in my space with me.
Okay. Okay. Because holding space still denotes boundaries of some.
Correct. Correct. And I'm saying you can be in the same space without becoming that space. In other words, you're not taking on the quality of my space. You're existing in it so that I know that two can walk in that road.
Is that similar to, like, we started off with cognitive dissonance?
Yep.
Can you sit with your partner in that cognitive dissonance space? Doesn't mean you agree or you are that, but can you sit? I guess one thing can be, if whatever reason this season of a person's life they want to keep a not so clean room, can you sit in that room and not be considered dirty?
So yeah, absolutely. Because a part of what we know is that if I sit in that room, right, does it mean that you're not going to dirty yourself if you sat on a dirty chair? Yeah, possibly, right? So I'm not saying it's safe.
Mm.
I'm saying that you are in the space, acknowledging that I can sit in the space with you without necessarily having to become the person making the dirt happen or the person being messy in that room, right? So it's like I'm in that space with you, and you know that I'm in this space with you, and you know that I genuinely would love for you not to be in this space, but I'm not afraid. I'm not holding an agenda of I'm happy or afraid for you. I'm with you in the same space. It's a deep place of existing with someone. And again, without becoming that person, but
Mhm.
just being. Uh, One of the deepest things that therapy does is existing in the same space as someone.
Mhm.
Because there are places in our lives, if we tell the truth about life, there are places in our lives that honestly we need someone to simply be there and say, I got you, it's okay. You don't need their input. You don't need them telling you with the agenda of here's what, here's my advice to you. Here's how you should do this or shouldn't do that. Truth be told, most of us know what we want or don't want to do. What we struggle with is the how.
Mhm.
So the space that I hold with you when you say, I don't know what to do, can be as simple as just existing and allowing you to go through that and letting you know that you're okay. Literally, it's a comforting space. Now, again, you're okay can be an agenda, right? It could be like, oh, I'm pushing that agenda on you, but sometimes that's what's needed. Sometimes a person, let's be honest. Sometimes I don't want anybody to tell me what to do. I want them to tell me everything is okay because I'm okay. At the core of the work, it's knowing that you are okay in your existence without all of the trappings of being human. You are okay. If you can reach that space with a person, with a human being, you're at the deepest level of where they exist. Now, some people say, well, what about the spiritual level? Yeah, there's spirituality, but even that, right? Where the three-dimensional world meets, it's the space of existence without judgment that actually begins and ends that conversation of who we are existing as, who are we as human beings.
That makes sense. I've been doing a lot of reading, and it's they break down the difference between the masculine and the feminine.
Hmm.
And they say the feminine is similar to nature.
Yep.
Think of the waves, how they flow in and out and in and out. There's no reason to try to break that flow. It
Yeah.
might not make sense, but I guarantee the waves will flow in and out.
Yeah.
I think that touches on what we had discussed, which is being empathetic, but specifically Black men having challenges being empathetic. It almost is accepting the flow, the waves moving back and forth, the sun rising and falling. Like, why is that so challenging for specifically Black men who you serve?
This is my conversation. So So I deal with a lot of Black men, both in my practice and as a coach, approaching issues around what it means to be an empathetic human being. What I know for a fact is that the self is desiring to be allowed space. And the truth is, if you don't interact with empathy, you cannot be skilled at using it. So if you're not given permission, I mean, from an early age, if you're not given permission to explore what empathy means in a safe and healthy way, what ends up happening is your ability to interact with it becomes stunted. And oftentimes that feeling that, what do you mean? I don't have to be I don't have to have empathy. Uh the world doesn't work that way. The world as you know it doesn't work that way because of certain social constructs that have been put in place that tell you who you must be. Well, you're not talking realistically. No, I am talking realistically because reality is created in all of its dimensions by our agreements. So if I look at how you show up and I tell you that this is how you should show up in order to be in that masculine space, and this is what you have to do, now your interpretation of what is okay and not okay in terms of empathy gets stunted. So there are a lot of Black men, particularly because of the socioeconomic realities that we face specifically. It is not safe for you to be in that space of, I care. We look at it, well, it's a numbers game. It's black and white. This is what it is. So which means that if I gotta jump in that space and be like, this is all that exists. And and I'm in a full-throated argument with you about how you think I'm mean. I hear this all the time. You think I'm mean. And I'm saying, I'm not being mean. I'm just telling you what it is. I don't even have a conception that perhaps there's another way of organizing this construct so that I can both be able to tell the truth and not break you as a human being emotionally. That's the lack of empathy I'm talking about. And what happens there is then there is a divide because we can't connect because you can't see the truth. And the other is like, you don't see your approach. I'm talking about specifically how couples oftentimes show up with Black men and their level of empathy. But the truth is, it's not just Black men. We got to tell the truth. It's a conception of masculinity and femininity that we lose our ability to understand what it means to be human and to connect at a very spiritual and truth and self level with another human being. All those things are encapsulated in the lack of empathy and our inability to actually make deep connections with our partners. This is a big deal.
And it almost seems like you have to, well, you don't have to, but it would be advantageous for you to learn those skill sets, learn how to be empathy, learn the flow. Also understand there's a lot of social constructions that limit connection and how to break those chains. But we don't get that privilege to be exposed to those things before we say this is going to be my life partner.
Correct. So what happens is if you walk in with the idea that as long as I am a provider in this, that's the role, right? If I'm a provider as a man, if I'm a provider in this relationship, I've done my part. And then all say, 10 years or 15 years into the relationship or 30 years sometimes, and the other partner in the relationship says, I'm tired of the way you approach me. Wait, what? You don't think that all of the things I've been doing in terms of paying the bills and taking the kids and all of this has been approaching you well? What else do you want? Because there isn't really a conception of, and this is where I turn this inward. That's what the GPS work is for. It's like, do you understand your relationship to yourself through empathetic lens? There are often times when I talk to Black men in terms of empathy, when you turn it inwards, they're like, I don't do anything for self-care. I just make sure I get it done by any means necessary. So we're producers, but we shut off humanity in areas that matter for the extension and longevity of the human being in the world. Empathy is a fundamental aspect of how we connect with other human beings, not just emotionally. Because honestly, it can go down so many levels. Like you don't want to be in a business relationship where empathy has no place in it. Because what will happen is you'll make the benefit, but there will be no trust. And anybody who knows deep levels of business will tell you trust is at the core of business relationships. So yeah, you can be profitable, but the question is it a sustainable relationship?
That makes sense. Now let's take a curveball, and I
Yeah,
want to see
let's
where this goes. I'm curious how this is gonna flow. And we're gonna talk. We're not gonna talk about man and women. Let's just talk about masculine and feminine.
yeah, let's do it.
When the masculine decides to accept the feminine in their life,
Mm-hmm.
romantic relationship, what should they be expecting? Because I think a lot of times we don't prepare the masculine to receive that feminine energy. So that's where the clashing comes from. So when the masculine says, I want to be with feminine, I want to make feminine part of my life, what are they really accepting?
What you're accepting is an individual first.
Yes.
Let's be clear, right? So because a lot of times we're looking for the fix, which is coming from that part of the brain that says that we have an answer to an equation, right? I think the deeper question is, what do you want your experience to be with the feminine? Like, what do you want the experience? Because if you can get to that answer, you'll be able to answer what that question really is. And that shifts for different people at different places. But here's what fundamentally I think I hear you asking.
Mhm.
If I am accepting feminine energy into my space, what I'm saying is I'm allowing for a space of balance. And so that is going to take some real masculine truth about what it means not to always be at the center, but creating an environment where there's balance, where sometimes you can take the back seat and sometimes you can't. And there are a lot of men who believe that the masculine takes over.
Mhm.
A lot of men believe that it takes over because it's how it's supposed to be. But the truth is,
Mhm.
there should be no takeover. There's a give and take for balance. There should be a space of creativity. If you have a painting and you simply decided that you have 10 colors on there, but all of the colors you have are at about 1%, and then the rest is like 80, what is it, 89% or right, of one color, your painting is going to be flat. Because the truth is, you haven't made space or created the balance necessary for you to have depth in that color, in the color palettes that you're creating. Now, it's a little more complex than that, but the truth is, if I am willing to accept that I'm not at the center of what's happening, I am available emotionally, right? I am available through the openness that I have around my beliefs. I am available. Remember, we're talking about being able to accept and create space for. We're not talking about becoming. We're talking about making space for. That's very different. It's the ability to say that you, in all of your glory, have a space that is honored, cherished, believe that it holds weight, it matters, it holds as much value as what I'm offering. That's hard to do on both sides. If the feminine sits and says, well, everything has to go through the way I experience you, then we have no space for a logical discussion. And oftentimes this is where people are missing each other, is because we're not telling the truth about what it is we're saying to each other. There are levels of communication. Now, I'll say it this way. Hopefully this helps somebody. If you look at who we are, oftentimes I talk about the things we say, think, and do. I call that the STDs, right? So the things you say, think, and do is a level of existence, but it's very superficial. When you're having conversations at that level, you're just talking about, yeah, I paid the bills, I did this, I did that. You're having that conversation. But the truth is, oftentimes you'll have, and I'm going to be very kind of stereotypical to make the point, you might have a female who's talking from that space of emotionally, I'm not experiencing you, and say, so that person is saying, my experience of you is this, and because they are not having that conversation, because another, so let's say the male is having the conversation of, well, I said that, what do you mean you don't see it? And it's like, no, come down to the emotional level. That's a little deeper so that you can have the true conversation around what you say, think, and do from the emotional level. If you go a little deeper, you're going to find there's a belief level. That belief level will tell you whether or not the emotional conversation is going to work. You have to alter that. Now, you know this from CBT, but you have to alter these levels at the level of alignment to tell the truth about who you're choosing to be in your life. And it's a constant awareness of what I bring to the table. If your way of showing up, right? Your way of showing up is the only space that we allow to fill inside of the relationship, then there may be there's a hole. So some of that work is actually creating space and allowing yourself to see yourself fully human, meaning that I have space for the masculine, I have space for the feminine. And what I find is a lot of men don't even believe that the space exists for them. They just simply believe that they're supposed to be the ones holding the space. Notice I said holding, not being in space with, but holding the space. And they have to become that thing. And that's very frustrating if you don't believe that you as a human being get to show up in the spaces that matter to you. So sometimes it's a work of convincing a man that it's okay to tell your wife that this feels misaligned because emotionally you're not connected to this. If it's the truth, you got to tell the truth. How do you fix something that you're not looking at as a reality? And in the back, deep down inside, you're saying, well, that's how I feel, but I can never say that because that person would never accept it. It's a
So
conversation.
and so let's talk about, so that's when a man decides to take on feminine, or when a masculine take on feminine. But what happens when the feminine takes on masculine? Not women and male, because as we know,
I got it.
there's
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
effeminate men and there's very masculine women, and that is 100% okay. But what happens when the feminine takes on the masculine? Like, what should be the expectation?
So expect that there's going to be a battle for where you're standing, right? And if the battle stops, that means that you're not in your authenticity in that relationship. That means that we actually have to work through, hey, is there more space for the other to exist? Or is it that there needs to be a takeover? Really, it is that it's a kind of acceptance work that says that I don't need to become you. I need to embrace you. I need to accept you. I need to receive you in spaces. So if I am overpowering in the feminine area, right, I'm overpowering my relationship with with the feminine expectations of who I am. What I end up with is a relationship that says I don't get to show up in the other space. The truth is that person needs to actually do the internal balance, and each individual need the same work. That's how you build a balance. Because if you think that one has to give up for the other, then at that point you don't have a balance. You simply have a takeover. But there are some real issues in your relationship that will show up maybe sometimes years later because of that imbalance that you allowed to be the existence of your relationship, rather than saying, no, we want to exist in balance here. So what are the spaces that maybe we give some and we take some? What are those spaces and how do I create that? That's a conversation inside of your relationship that you have to have.
And as you know, I'm a financial planner, and money
Yeah.
comes up a lot when I
Yep.
talk to couples. Why do couples struggle with money? What is that?
It's an identity conversation. These are the levels of existence that I was telling you about. It's one of the deeper levels before you even get to awareness. It's a space where you're having a conversation about, how do I show up in the world financially and what matters to me? And oftentimes people are not aware of their actual intentions with their money. And so it's a conversation around, why do I need the light bill paid on time? I hear this a lot. You'd be shocked at how that's like a consistent thing. And if you hear the truth about it, you'll hear an emotional conversation show up, right? Because the emotions are just pointing to the self in terms of what is safety for me in that light bill? What is stability for me in that light bill? And so to actually have a conversation around money, you got to tell the truth about, how do you feel about your relationship to yourself first? Like, who am I choosing to be in my relationship? And it's not, it's a priority conversation, but it's even deeper than that. It's a value conversation. Like, what do I value as a human being that makes me, listen, feel the way I choose to feel in my relationship? And is there a way I can feel something different? When you hear an argument over finances, what you're actually arguing over is, who do I get to be and self-express as?
Mm, that's good.
And if you can have that conversation, it feels freeing. I can't tell you how many couples will tell me, yeah, that feels very free. If we could ever get to that place where I feel like, if I could feel like there's a way to make security happen in my relationship, then we can build some goals and dreams about stuff I never thought I could do. But that emotion of insecurity locks up the possibility of, well, I think we should take a trip somewhere. Do you understand what I mean? Like, there's a real conversation around identity or who you choose to be, both at the principled level and at the value level. Both of those need to be addressed in honesty before you can get to the point where you say, no, we know why we're building. I was talking about Jay-Z and Beyonce earlier. You would expect nothing but musical empire from them, because at the identity level, there's a part of them that identifies as musicians, as artists, as the greatest, baddest, biggest. That's an identity thing. So there are some things that if they showed up and moved in a certain way, you would be like, that doesn't seem like that's the kind of way they would use their money or do the thing or run that business. You look at Oprah. I use Oprah because people know her, not because of anything else. But you look at Oprah, money is simply a magnifier of the self in the physical world. So when we touch a dollar bill or whatever money currency you're using, you're touching a physical promissory note of who you choose, how you choose to magnify yourself in the 3D world. So if we're going to tell the truth, you should be looking at, who do I choose to extend myself out as? And that's why I bring Oprah up. A lot of times people are like, they remember, you get a car, you get a car, you get a car. Is it really the car that we were so amazed? Or was it the generosity? That's the principle there. Was it the generosity, the idea that I could, or the happiness? I like happiness, but but was that a part of the expression, or was it just simply that everybody got a car? Because the truth is, a car is just to move from point A to point B. I'd rather a chariot. Like I'm just making it make sense. Like, let's be honest, it's not the car. If you ask, what kind of cars did she give?
Mm.
Was it really like, we didn't get a Lamborghini, or like, nobody got like, I mean, I'm just saying, let's be honest. It really wasn't even about the car. It was about the fact that you saw generosity in a way that you hadn't seen expressed and magnified that big. And it's
Right.
like, it gave people a sense of imagination, right? That we could self-express in this way. It was like she created a whole new level of self-expression for people in her rank. Do you understand what I mean? So really, the question of money is at the level of self-expression, at the deepest level of self, which are the level of existence I've been talking about this whole time. If you know that, you can find yourself then being able to experience connection and a sense of really purpose in your life because you know what you're connecting to. That's happiness work.
And if you meet a couple and they are having money issues, they completely disagree.
Yep.
What are the steps that you take them on
I
to
thought I was going to get a lot of questions like this in this interview.
what are the steps that you take them down to say, hey, like this is how you reconcile those inner child traumas, those ideas about money trauma, that feeling of insecure. Like, what is that journey?
Yeah. So I think the first step that I offer people is always tell the truth. Sounds so simple.
Yeah.
But tell the truth at every level of your existence. And when I
That's
talk,
hard.
yeah, I'm glad you recognize that not everyone, people will, for a lot of people, it's like, that went over my head. No, that is that is a fundamentally like human life question.
Yeah.
Can I tell the truth at every level of my existence? And when you begin to do that, what you're doing is you're untying your soul from things that don't line up with who you choose to be as a human being. So if a couple comes in and says, we just can't agree on what's happening money wise,
Yeah, yeah.
you got to have the soul conversation. You got to have the self conversation, which is when you think of yourself, and I do this all the time to really, when you think of yourself, and then you look at your money on paper, what emotions show up in the places where you're spending? That will tell you the dissonance. The places where you're spending money, that's a doing, but you don't believe in it. Or you somehow are showing up as this person that's doing this or that. And in fact, you yourself at the deepest level are saying to yourself, why do we do it this way? Well, I make space for you to do it, but I don't want it like that. Okay, well, why? Do you have an answer for that? There are answers, but you have to tell the truth, right? And a lot of times it'll come back to, because emotions tell you about past stories. It's a whole nother conversation there. But you have to tell the truth. That emotion is trying to tell you about something that happened before that you accepted as a reality. And you need to say, is this creating the reality I want? These are deep questions. But that's why I recommend the coaching. That's why I recommend the, therapy to really know yourself. Because in order to actually step into a relationship and say, okay, I'm ready to do money with someone else, you got to know what your hangups are. Where are the areas in yourself where you're like, no, I don't want to express that way. You'll be shocked how much money is a mirror of the places where you're locked up emotionally.
Wow. So you may know this, like I think we discussed, I provide a online course for couples, helping them
Yeah,
in their financial journey.
yeah.
Where should that sit in far as, people take premarital counseling
Yep.
usually in a religious scenario, but when should those discussions, those financial discussions happen between a couple? Is it when they begin sharing expenses? Is it when they decide to become intimate? Is it when they become exclusive? Like, where do you think that discussion lies?
So here's the thing. I think that as early as you can have it,
Mm.
the earlier the better. Because if you are in that dating phase and you're having conversations about money, you need, now you got me on a soapbox. I think we have this idea that when, I'm going to be very traditional and typical to make a point. When the man takes that woman on the date and he pays for everything, I think that oftentimes it sets a precedence for that precedent to say, this is how we are doing life. 5 years into the marriage, and the woman's like, everything you showed me at the beginning is not what I'm getting. And the man is saying the same thing too. He's like, I never set up for this. How did I become the cash cow in this conversation? The conversation never happened. So it's a setup that I say, if you are genuinely serious about someone, conversations with an S should be happening in terms of, hey, how do you usually do money by yourself? And people will be so superficial about it. They stay in the STD levels, right? Those superficial levels of what you say, think, and do. And they'll tell you things like, well, what's your credit score? It's very superficial. Not that it's not important. I get it. I fully get it. I'm saying to you, that's superficial because you can fix your credit score. But if I don't believe that I should ever be someone who invests, I want to know that when I walk into the door in that dating relationship and say, oh, no, I don't have any intentions of ever investing. And in the back of your head, you're like, I'm going to marry this person because I think he's going to help me to set my investments up. Nothing wrong with having that perception, but you got to have the conversation. We are afraid of the truth. That's why I said you have to tell the truth at every level of your existence. That is how you show up.
So in common culture, there's a talk about, so and so needs to make so and so for us to begin to date.
Yep.
I've even thought about telling men, hey, she needs to bring in some assets into the relationship so she has some endowment because the dynamics of income is changing.
Yep.
What do you think about those cultural conversations about like so and so needs to make X? Because as you know, we work with couples all the time.
Yep.
There's going to be time where one partner's making more than the other. There's going to be time where the partner's unemployed. Like people don't understand that is a natural flow of life.
That is how it goes.
And so like having these expectations up front can manifest in different things. So what are your thoughts on those?
My thoughts are you start the relationship with these conversations.
Mm-hmm.
My thoughts are you have genuine, authentic conversations around goals and dreams financially that are connected to your emotional life. The truth, right? The truth. We have a hard time with telling ourselves the truth. Oftentimes, people are like, well, I can't say that. No, you can't say that because you have a hard time saying it to yourself. It's not even the other person that you struggle with telling, because as soon as you could say it to yourself and see how, because we carry connotations of what these things we believe are. We have these ideas that if I say this in the relationship, it's going to mean that, right? And so we're like, I can't say that. When in fact, if you could just say it, there could be a space where you decode why. What happens to people, hear me out on this. What happens to people when you have a financial conversation that has no emotions is that it becomes transactional. It's like, I do this, you do that. Now, you may think that is efficient and works, but if at the soul and connection level of the true human being, the person is saying, but that's not my dream for how I want to do life. At some level, you're holding them hostage. and it might be for a great goal. We have stability. Ain't that one of the things you said you wanted? Stability. I'm telling you how to get there. Mm-hmm. The question is, what is the process by which you reach stability and perhaps lose the fun in your relationship? Do you understand what I'm saying? There are conversations that need to be had early on about, hey, we are coming together in a relationship. How do we want it to be? Mm-hmm. Notice I said be, not what do we want to do. You can always figure that out. How do we want to be together in this relationship? When you have that conversation around your finances, you're going to find yourself finding a pathway that moves you in the direction of like, oh, that's how we do our money together. Some people are just like, I want it to be secure. But in my life, in my history, security means that I let nobody else take care of my finances because I don't trust that if I give you my money, that you're going to do with it the way that I want it to go. So I want a separate account. But wait a minute, we're doing life together. My definition of life together means that we do everything in the same exact space. Create space. Create some space in your definition of what you want. Because you're now with another human being who says, I need some money in a different account, and then I want some money with us together. That's a solution that says, okay, well, how do we use the money we do together? Now we got emotional conversations to have. This is a real conversation in terms of the levels. Now, I want to say one more thing because you asked a very specific question, which is what are the steps? The steps are simple. You start by telling the truth. You look at yourself through the lens of the different levels of existence. And you say to yourself, am I at the highest level of my self-expression on each one of these levels? The second question is, am I in alignment with where my partner desires to be? If not, can we create something new? Those are the spaces that you make things happen.
That's so tough because it starts off requiring you being honest with yourself.
Yeah.
And in the moment, especially if you're in a romantic dating situation, you just want to be there.
And you can be.
But I guess you're right. You can be, but
Yes.
the insecurity is like if I fully show myself,
That is the insecurity.
partner,
Now you're telling the truth.
will my partner still accept me?
Absolutely. But I would rather know that on day 3 than
Yeah.
on day 7,003.
Yeah. 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 What is your thoughts on this? I talk to a lot of young folks. I do a lot of lectures and stuff. And I just feel like the marriage rates are going to continue to fall.
Mm.
Folks are saying it's not worth it.
Yep.
Trauma from past experiences,
Yep.
whether it's their parents or themselves. Like, do you see there ever being a new renaissance of marriage, or is coupling it up as we traditionally did, whether right or wrong, is that going to go away of the dinosaurs?
I'm pulling my crystal ball.
Yes.
And I'm going to say that honestly, over time, relationships have changed. But if we tell the truth, when we talk about it in terms of marriage, that's a legal contract. People are not going to stop being together.
Yeah.
We have to tell the truth. And children are not going to stop being born.
There's a slowdown slightly.
There may be a slowdown, and I'm not saying, listen, we can go down that rabbit trail and figure out, right, how when does that happen? But the truth is our conception of what it means to be a stand-up citizen in a society, given what does it mean financially? What does it mean with my trauma? What does it mean, right? So all of these things are the things I'm talking about when I say do your internal mapping. So that exists. There's no question that the weight that's been placed on society has created that. This is why this work is so important to me, is because the goal is to release the weight. Mm-hmm. To get rid of the heaviness around what it means to be an individual and who I'm choosing to be in the world, so I can be free enough to walk into a space of freedom with someone else. To say, hey, this is how I choose to be. How you choose to be. We should be like this together. These areas, I don't know, you're choosing to be that, I choose to be this. You think we could coexist in that space without feeling like one has to be right and one has to be wrong? This is the conversation. So if you put, I was going to say the binoculars, but if you look on the crystal ball and you say to yourself, what's likely? What's likely is that we're always going to be marrying or in some form connecting in relationship, because really human beings crave and need, we know this from science, crave and need connection.
Yeah. Do you think the rise of internet usage, virtual reality, explicit stuff online,
yep,
I feel like that's a big indicator of changing the dynamics.
It certainly is.
And it's only going to get worse because the technology is just going to get better.
I think that is you're speaking to some of the truth of the danger of what we're creating. Mm-hmm. Because if I am not connecting to a human being the way that the machinery was made to connect, right? At what level am I shifting the connections that happen, and whether or not those connections can deal with the way we have created society? That's the question. So you have to look at yourself and say, the way we're making these connections, is it sustainable for life together?
Mm.
Or are we building an isolated society that does not live together in real time? And is that sustainable? That's the question. And each one of us have to answer that within our own lives of how we integrate with these new systems.
Yeah, spot on, spot on. So, what's next for you? So, you're building your practice.
Yeah.
Where do you see your practice in the next 5 years? Like, what are you building towards? You mentioned a lot of systems that you're developing.
Yeah. So funny enough, I just spoke with LCSW yesterday about the possibility of working with him for some internet kind of marketing stuff because my goal is to do more speaking.
Yes.
um, to do more public speaking around the happiness and internal GPS system that I have, to really bring people to awareness. Because what happens is that we have a lot of people who don't even know who they are. I know that seems like a deep question, but it should be fundamental.
Mm.
Do you know who you are? And so the systems I'm putting in place right now include I'm working on a workbook for couples and for individuals in the GPS. I have a course that I have that will be coming out soon that is essentially the internal GPS course to teach people how to navigate the internal space so that they know how to show up in their relationship. And um you know, in terms of my practice, my practice is in Atlanta, Georgia, which you know. So my goal is to eventually be able to use that just as a hub, as a base for all of the product that I'm putting out to increase people's happiness levels, both to themselves and relationship to themselves, relationship to others, and the way in which they show up in the world. So um, I have this I think I got a couple of books in me. And I've
I,
known this for years, honestly. I just need to uh get to writing. But I've started on these kind of practical steps of how people can use some of this information because I think that it's crucial
yeah,
that we do some of this work in order to navigate how the questions you really are asking, which is how do we do marriage in 100 years? How do we do that? Is it sustainable, or how do we navigate the way in which we interact with others in society? These are questions of self. We want to ask them in terms of community, but really they're questions of self.
mhm.
Because if you don't ask the self, you could do anything you want in the community, it's going to fall flat, it's going to be inauthentic because self has to do the internal work first.
Correct, correct, spot on, spot on. I like that. So, you have, like I said, you have a lot of things going on. Um, what advice would you give financial planners? So this is the point where I take my medicine. What do you feel like financial planners are dropping the ball with working with couples? Because you see a lot of couples, and maybe they have one, maybe they don't.
That's a good question. I've had the opportunity to deal with some couples who are really like needing that kind of support. And I think that financial planning can be scary for couples.
Mhm.
The reason it's scary is because oftentimes we're making decisions at the wrong existence level of existence for the person.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, we have a very kind of broad, what are your hopes and dreams? Oh, house and we lock them into hopes and dreams that maybe aren't even what the person truly desires at the core soul level, but we lock them in so that we can tell them how to get there. And my thing would be ask the deeper questions first
Mm,
so that those questions are so clear that working with someone like yourself as a financial planner would be just a fundamental extension to that human being. Because again, expanding yourself in the world through money can feel very scary if at the core of your principled self you're shaky, if you're not sure what you're wanting to put into the world. What role do I play if I'm just simply, if my only concern is, well, I want to be safe and secure, so I'm going to save a lot of money. Okay, you saved a lot of money, but money is supposed to expand you. How is it giving you life or perhaps legacy? But how, right? And I'm not talking about the how that you're talking in terms of like if you do this around a 10-year plan, that's wonderful. The question is, how is it connecting to your 10-year life existence? How is it getting you to a space where you feel like, well, I know that I'm saving for college, or I know I'm saving for another second degree, whatever it might be, right? I know I'm saving for that thing, but I'm only doing that because I feel like at some level I'm not enough in my relationship. You might need a shift in what you're saving for or how you're saving. So
I think,
that's the answer I would give.
yeah, I think, and that's, I'm a big believer in that. My clients get annoyed by it, but I have to question: do you need that house?
Yep.
Do you need that car? Is that going to make you really happy? Do you know the trade-off? And those questions, I feel like, allow them to actually appreciate if they decide to buy it,
Yep.
because they'll utilize it better. I feel, my
Yep.
personal.
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah.
So
Tell the
if it,
truth.
it's, that's a whole nother episode. So if somebody's saying, okay, I like what he's saying, I need to do this deeper work as an individual, or they're a couple, what is the best way they can reach out to you, get connected with your material and or your services?
So yeah, so they can reach me through phone. I know that a lot of people won't give their phone, but you can reach me by phone. That's probably the easiest way. 678-920-8916. Um, you know, if I don't answer, I may be in a session. That's the truth about what's going on in life, right? But they can reach me there, but they can also reach me by through the website where I'll walk them through what's going on. There's if you're not in Atlanta and you're looking for services, it would be coaching. And coaching allows us to kind of work across state lines without any limitations there. And so if they're looking for coaching, which is different from therapy, obviously, if you've got clinical issues, then we'll talk about doing clinical work. So if they're looking for coaching, it's AlanEmmanuelCoaching.com. Alan is ALAIN. So AlanEmmanuelCoaching.com. Or if they're looking for therapy, they can go to the therapy side of AlanEmmanuelTherapy.com. So
Love it.
yeah.
What are your parting words for couples? If you were to summarize this interview, or even something that popped in your head, like what is
Yeah.
your parting word for all couples out there trying to survive?
Be good to yourself first so that you can be good to others.
I like it. I like that a lot. Well, thank you very much, Alain Emmanuel, the happiness coach,
Yeah.
also licensed professional counselor. His information is going to be in the details below. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
Take care.